It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Vinings Lake. If this is your first time here, let me extend my welcome to you as well. Okay, a couple thoughts off the top. First, our Taylor is out, and he's normally running sound and slides and lights and all that stuff. And Melissa and her son Jack in the back. Come on, people, can we give it up? I mentioned that because some of you don't know, but the moment we went to table, that music that was playing, I was like, now that's the vibe. All right. I didn't want you to change it. I was like, no, that's it. All right. So fantastic. Second thought that I want to mention to you is Friday night, my wife and I went to Marietta Square. Are you familiar with this place? Yeah. And there's a theater there called The Strand. Do you know about this place? It's been there forever. We went there because our own student pastor, Garrett, is in a musical. Now, if you don't know Garrett, Garrett is our student pastor, but Garrett is an actor. He's been an actor for a long time, lived in New York for a while, and then moved to Atlanta because there was like a lot of kind of work that's happening in Georgia right now. And then I met him, and I'm like, why don't you be our student pastor? He's like, I've never been a student pastor. I'm like, but you're an actor. So if you're any worth grain of salt, you should be able to act like a student pastor, right? And he's like, I think I can do that. I'm like, fantastic. So you don't know this, but what he's doing right now in the back room with these people, that's his job. He's acting. This is what he's doing, right? But he's in this musical, and we went to see it. And I mentioned to you because people, my mind was blown. I have never been more proud to call a man our student pastor than what I saw that night. So I saw that to say this. I don't have a link, but here's what I encourage you. They have 1 week left in the show. So they got a Thursday performance, a Friday performance, a Saturday performance, and then I think maybe another Sunday. Now, also, I just want to pause here. Garrett's not the only one from Vinings Lake in this musical. Grayson sitting right over here, all right? Yeah, come on. And you'll see more of him with music and all this kind of stuff coming up. But I gotta just tell you, I was like a pastor sitting there, and they have drinks there. So I had like a Moscow Mule. You familiar with these? That's my choice, by the way. If we ever hang out and you're like, what's pastor drink? Moscow Mule, all right? So I was sitting there in Moscow Mule, but I kept kicking Katie, and I was like, look at these people. These are Vinings Lake people. And I was just so proud, but the whole thing is so fantastic. So I mentioned that to say, we're in a series called The Energetic Exchange, and some of you just need a moment where you're not online and you need to rest. Here's what I did. I encourage you to power your phone off, put it in your pocket, and then go grab a drink and sit there and for like, I don't know, a couple hours, just watch this thing unfold. And Steve Martin, like the Steve Martin, wrote this musical, and it is fantastic. So anyways, can we give it up for Garrett way back here, who doesn't even know we're talking about him? So we're going to go from that all the way into some things that transpired this week. I rewrote the entire teaching. I started on Thursday, wrote it Friday, finished it up last night, and I just want to do my best to get into it. And I'm going to try to stick to my script. And there's so much to say. Also, so much not to say. And maybe that's a good place for us to start. Let me liberate some of us. You don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't. Now, I say that to just say, I hope you take the pressure off of yourself. I feel like we live in a time where anytime something happens, we need to go to our news feed and we become the announcers. And we have to announce our thoughts. And all that's great. If that's your thing, do it. I would just say, don't feel any pressure that you have to give explanations or some profound insight into what happened this week. Just be who you are. Be where you are. Now, in light of that, it hasn't gone lost on me that some of you may not know what happened this week. All right? Some of you may have taken a sabbatical from the news, and you're like, talk to me. What happened? There's a lot that happened this week, actually. It wasn't just one thing. There were lots of things that happened. First of all, there was another school shooting in Colorado. Second, there was a political activist, a right-wing political activist, Charlie Kirk, who was speaking at a university, and he was shot and killed. And for those of you that aren't aware of that, it created A lot of stuff surfaced this week that have been buried, what I believe in just a couple layers low in the collective unconscious of America right now. And I will also say to you, I just think by and large, the last couple of years, there's been a lot of things that have been buried under the subconscious of America that's surfacing right now. And so I want to give us all grace because it's hard to see, isn't it? Isn't it hard to see? Have you ever been, here's an example. I meet with people sometimes and they are in love. I marry people all the time and I love it. It's my favorite thing to do here. And funerals. That may sound weird, but you all know I'm kind of obsessed with death a little bit, all right? And this is how I knew I was going to be a pastor. It's like, what do you want to do? Weddings and funerals, all right? But weddings are interesting because, you know, you're newly married. People just love each other. They're like, I love this person. And then over time, I have, this is just personal for me, but I keep a record of all the people I marry. And then, actually, there's a document. I keep a record of all the people I marry because I go back and check on them periodically. Because I marry all kinds of people. People I know, people I don't know, just, you know, whatever. It's interesting. Right now, my track record is still in the positive, which means the people I've married are still together. You know what I mean? Like, that's amazing. But I will tell you, it's getting close. You know what I mean? Like, so I keep checking on people going, please don't, because I don't want it to flip. I don't want a losing record. I want the winning record. And maybe that's not the losing record. Maybe sometimes you need to walk away, so maybe that's the win. Anyways, all that said, it's interesting because sometimes I'll meet with people after they've been married and they'll say things like, I don't even know who this person is anymore. You ever had that? You ever been in a relationship with someone and then are shocked by their actions? And you're like, I don't even know who that is. That's not the person. And then you're in a spiral because you're like, how did I miss it? You ever been there? How did I not pick up on? And then people that are watching from the outside going, yeah, how did you not? That's so obvious. You ever watched a show like that? You're like, it's so obvious. How did you not? Katie made me watch the other night a show on Netflix called Unknown Caller. Have you seen? Just raise your hand if you've seen this Unknown. Okay. First of all, I just kept going, what are we watching? What are we watching? And then I realized, oh, this is America. Right now. This is America. If you haven't seen it, you can go watch it if you want to. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying, prepare your brain. But I'm watching it and I'm going, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but for those that have seen it, you know there's that one individual, and they're talking like they're sane. Like it, well, I didn't start it. And I just keep looking back at Katie going, and this is, just hear me, I'm going, what the hell? I can't tell you how many times this pastor of yours has said, what the hell, in the last 10 years of my life. It is, I wish I had better language, but I just keep watching things going, what the hell? Like, what is happening? And I'm watching this going, how does she not see this? How does she not see this? And this has been the cry, I think, for many of us. And I mention that to say, I think some of us recently have been like, man, I was born and raised in America, and now I'm seeing something in America that I didn't know was there. Now, some of you saw it a long time ago. Most of the people of color I know are going, welcome, white people. Welcome. And I want to say to all of our black, brown people of color in this room, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your patience. White supremacy runs deep in us. You know that. We're trying to work through it. We're trying to do some healing work. But I want you to know, even the best of the best doing healing work can still be blinded. And so what's happening right now, this is my opinion, I believe in America, we are waking up. I believe our president is the unedited and unfiltered version of who America really is. And that is hard to say, and it's hard to see. But I have studied the history of our nation. And I know that what I am seeing right now is not new. It has been embedded since the origins of this country. And it is up to us to let this thing surface and then offer it up as some sense of remedy for healing. Because as the great Richard Rohr says, as you hear me say all the time, it's a mantra of my life. You cannot heal what you do not acknowledge. And this is why when I hear the president talk about how he wants to go into museums and erase all the traces of slavery, it's deeply problematic on many levels. One of which is if we deny the truth of our own country, we will never heal from what we've done. We must acknowledge it, we must own it, and we must name it. And then we must repent of it. Now, that said, this week, in light of all the tragedies, I'd like to start here. First, we are not fuzzy on what took place this week. I want to say this because people are watching online and we're progressives in here. Lots of us are. Some of us identify that. Some of us don't. We've got all kinds of folks in here. But I want to say to you, as, quote, progressive Christians, unquote, if that's the label you want to give, I want to say we're not fuzzy on what happened this week. I want to be clear. What happened to the students in Colorado, what happened to this political activist Charlie Kirk was, and I believe we're given strong language for moments just like this, I believe it was evil. I believe it was inhumane, and I would call it sin. What happened to the kids in Colorado is reprehensible. Violence in all forms is wrong. And the reason I think we can land on that is because if we even start to slide into the idea that violence might be a solution, I need you to hear me. Do not fall for that lie. And I pause here for just a minute because I have seen some of my friends on the left that are starting to lean into versions of violence. And I just want us to be really, really careful here. Because if we start leaning into violence, my brothers and sisters, I need you to hear me, we start becoming the very thing we're opposing. And what I want you to know, the reason I'm so passionate about it is not just because of violence for the sake of violence. I want you to know violence never works. And I don't know how Americans have not seen this yet, but if violence worked, it would have ended in World War I. But it didn't work. You know what that did? It spurred World War II, which inevitably will likely spur World War III, right? Because violence only creates more violence. And I know in the moment it can feel like, oh, but we're stopping something, right? You might be temporarily, but I want you to know, hear me, there will be others that are created out from the violence that has been created. And this is true in all forms. So, I think one of the greatest examples we're given is Dr. King. I really do. I think that's why he's championed in America. I know for me as a pastor, I don't know of anyone I probably have more respect for than Dr. King in the way he led the resistance movement. Because he embedded his body into the nonviolent way of Jesus. And somehow he knew that this was the path. And so I would just like to offer you some words from Dr. King that I think sum up this. He says, hate multiplies hate. Violence multiplies violence. And toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. And so I would just plead with all of us. I don't care what your political ideology is. All of us, for those listening, on the right, all of us, we must find better ways forward. Because violence will not end the way we think it will end. I'll tell you what it does. It creates radical individuals. And you better believe everything that happened this week is not the end of some far-right radical movement. It's only going to create more. And that's the last thing we want as a country. So this is why I'm so hopeful, because communities like this, we can come in and try to give language to it and say, okay, we're going to move a better way. All right. Now, all of that said, let me say to the Kirk family, I'm told he had a wife. kids. I don't know anything about this man, other than I would just say my condolences out to his wife and kids. I hate that we live in a country that this happened. And I'll be full transparency. I was anxious this week a little bit, which is totally normal if that's you. I think the collective body of humanity's nervous system is screaming right now. Because it's not just in America. Can I tell you all this? I did my first book interview this week, all right? Which is, some of you are like, you have a book? I do have one, all right? It's coming October 9th. We're going to have a book launch party here October the 12th, which we'll talk about, but it's going to be a party, all right? And I want everybody to come. It's going to be fantastic. But I've been doing these interviews now. My wife and I are going to Los Angeles this week. Oh my God, can't wait to tell you about this. I can't tell you about it now because it's got to be recorded, but it's going to happen. But we're flying out to LA and I get to talk about my book on this like really massive stage. And oh my God, I'm so, my heart's going, my anxiety's peaking, but yet I'm going to talk about anxiety. I'm like, no, I got it all under control. Seriously. No, it's good. I can tell you how to cure anxiety. Oh my God, right? So we're flying out to LA, and then it just begins. Like, we've got all these Tucson, Arizona, Houston, Nashville. Oh, yeah, going on a book tour. Oh, my God. I'm like, let's do this, right? No. All of that said, I was in an interview this week, and this lovely lady from the UK, so her podcast is over there, all right? Which I'm not even sure where over there is, but I know it's across the water. But she's in UK, and she got on, and she just had, like, the most amazing, beautiful accent. And I wanted to answer the questions really short because I just wanted to hear her voice. You know what I'm talking about? God, is there a more soothing voice than an English accent? And so she's talking to me. But anyways, she said to me, we're in the middle of this conversation, and she's like, let's talk about the collective right now. Like, what's happening, not just like nationally for you Americans, but I want to talk about what's going on over here at the UK, because apparently there's a lot going on politically over there with their prime minister and all kinds of stuff. And so we start talking, and the next thing I realize, oh my God, some of the problems we're having here, they're also having there. So it's not even just national. So you begin to realize maybe there's like a massive collective human body thing happening right now. And she said to me, is it okay that I'm scared? I said, it's not only okay, it's perfectly human. She said, I'm scared. She said, Cody, how did the leaders we have across the world, she started naming like Kim Jong-un, like all, she's like, how did these people who have the emotional maturity of a fifth grader, how did all of them become leaders at the same time? She's like, do you worry about like extinction of the human species? I was like, not until you just said it. But now I am. Now I say all that to just say this, people, we are living in a historic moment here. And I'm not trying to elevate anxiety, but I am trying to tell you this. It is a wild time if you look at the leadership of nations and countries. And I'm not sure how the harvest that we're seeing now, where people started planting that. But all I know is this, we can start planting different seeds right now. So when those babies in the back get our age, they're not looking around going, what happened to our parents and how did they give the reins of power to these people? Yeah, let's do that. That's a great start. If we could just shift it for our kids in the back, that would be helpful. Now, all of that said, everything that happened this week, let me say something about emotions real fast, and then I gotta get into it. First, it's not easy being human right now. It's not easy being here. It's not easy being American. It's not easy being me. It's not easy being you. I believe our collective nervous system is screaming right now, and I want to encourage you to make room for all the feelings, all of them. Because many of you have texted me this week. Many of you have voiced it online, and you're like, I'm so conflicted. Now, some of you are like, not conflicted at all. Pretty easy week. Just being honest. Some of you are like, nope, I'm good. I'm good. Great. And here's the thing. Don't try to manufacture emotions that aren't in you. How much policing have we seen this week online? You need to feel this way. I can't believe you would. It would be great for just America if we would all set ourselves free and liberate ourselves from trying to control other people. It's okay. You may see something you search. Check it out. You don't actually have to jump in that. Here's a great thing. You can hit block. You can hit block and save your energies. You get to decide that. But I just want to say to all of us, there's no need to try and manufacture some emotion that you don't have. Be where you are. But I would also say there is no need to try to police someone else's emotional response. You understand social media is a lament platform. So when you go on realizing that a lot of these people don't really have communities like this. And so they're in the void. They're screaming and crying out from the pain that's within them. They're trying to give language to it. Let's all give grace to that. All of it. Now, that said, I want to do something. I want to read a little bit of words of Jesus. I want to give a historical moment, and then need to talk about Charlie Kirk for a minute. And here's why. I wrestled, because I thought about not even acknowledging it. But then I thought, Binding Slave people are like, that was weird, because he acknowledges everything. All right? But I want to, because I want to show you, I want to try to show you a couple layers below what I think is happening on the surface, okay? So let's do this. I want to read a passage of scripture from Matthew chapter 7. It's not going to be on the screen. Nothing is. Just wrote it yesterday. But this is the end of what is called the Sermon on the Mount. You familiar with the Sermon on the Mount? That's Matthew 5, 6, and 7. All right? There's also in Luke a Sermon on the Plain, I believe it's called. Oh, by the way, just a side note, that's enough to tell you what we're actually reading here. All right? Was it a plain or was it a mountain? You missed the point, right? Okay. The power of the Sermon on the Mount is that Jesus steps into, and here's what I need to know about the Sermon on the Mount. These are all these sayings of Jesus that scholarship says they've kind of put together. But it's Jesus stepping into and here's what you need to know. Remember this when you're reading the New Testament. A volatile political and religious situation. That first century world was as volatile politically, spiritually, religiously as America is today, if not more, right? There was some intense stuff happening. And what Jesus does is he offers his followers a new way to be in the world. That's why it's so radical, the Sermon on the Mount. A new way to be in the world. Now, it is a brilliant, practical, comforting, provocative, profound, political announcement of a path that Jesus shows us through the Sermon on the Mount that he says leads to, here's the word, life. Life. Now, that said, at the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, he gives three metaphors. One, of a gate. Narrow is the way. Broad is the way that leads to a gate. Okay. Second, fruit. Good fruit, bad fruit. Third, house. House on a rock or house on a sand. Now, I cannot go into all those metaphors. I want to pick the first one and a tip of the second one, okay? So here's what I want to talk about. Let's talk about this gate for a minute. This is Matthew 7, verse 13. Here's metaphor 1. Jesus said, enter through the narrow gate. For the gate is wide, and the road is easy that leads to destruction. And there will be many who take that road. For the gate is narrow, and the road is hard that leads to life. And there are few who find it. Okay, that's metaphor 1. Then I just want to read the top line because you got to put this stuff in context. He says all that and he says, so beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Verse 16, you will know them by their fruits. Okay? Okay? According to Matthew, Jesus said this. All right? Now, all that said, here's the question. What is Jesus talking about? And what was going on in the world? First, let's eliminate this. Jesus was not talking about himself. Okay? I want you to pause there. Jesus, when he says narrow is the way, if you grew up evangelical like me, you heard that verse used to say Jesus is the only way to heaven. And if you're gonna go to hell, it is narrow. And this is where they get their theology that when you die and you go to hell, there's going to be a vacancy sign that's always on because it's literally like everyone's just come on in, pack it in, because broad is the way that leads to destruction. So almost everybody but the evangelicals are going to hell. Do you see how, and I mean this, but do you see how, shallow, narcissistic, you can even look in and see the white supremacy in an interpretation like that. Like, oh, just people like me are going. Okay, that's a disservice to what I think. On behalf of Matthew, you've wrecked his whole text. It's a disservice to what Matthew's saying. And it helps to know a little bit about what's going on here. First of all, Israel has a whole history of being conquered by oppressors. You know this. Egyptian, Assyrian, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and now in the first century when this is being written, the Romans. And here's what you need to know. There were people in this moment. So you had the moment that they placed this on the mouth of Jesus, and then you had the moment in which Matthew is writing this. And those are different time frames, but close. Most scholarship says Matthew's book's probably written somewhere in the 80s, Common Era, right? Now, that said, what I can tell you what was happening in the life of Jesus during the time of Jesus, and even what was happening at the time in which Matthew is writing this, which would have been post-70 Common Era, which is the destruction of Jerusalem, you'll still see what Matthew is doing here. There were people during that time that believed God was going to liberate them from the nasty oppressor, the Romans. And they were looking for a leader or a path or a movement to usher in this liberation. And I want you to know something. There were a number of responses to this Roman oppression. There were many individuals that came along and says, let me show you the path to liberation. There were many groups that came along and says, let me tell you how to usher in the, quote, kingdom of God, unquote. There were many ways that you could have taken that promised peace. Caesar was one of them. Many people believed Caesar and his way of violence was going to bring peace. So there were a lot of people in Judaism in that first century that were like, you know what? Let's just get on board. Even though they were oppressed, it was like a form of Stockholm syndrome. They began to realize, well, maybe the oppressor isn't as bad. I mean, look, check out our roads. You know what I mean? How many of us have heard that? That still happens. I mean, they're not as bad. I mean, look at what we have, okay? Now, there was one particular Jewish resistance group that also claimed to have a way, and it was called, check it out, the Jesus movement. In first century, the way. So, they really chose a strong word here. They wanted a mission statement. Well, what could we call ourselves? The way. Okay? Jesus movement was a resistance movement in some capacity. There were also other resistant groups. One of them were what history calls zealots. Are you familiar with this, right? Now, zealots was a Jewish political and religious movement that rose up, historians say, somewhere around 6 Common Era. And they were known for their fierce resistance to the Roman rule. They were willing to use violence to fight back against Rome. And some of them, as time went on, branched off of the zealots and became a particular group called the Sicarii. Now, Sicarii is another word for, check it out, dagger men, okay? You're like, who are these people? This is a radical branch off of the zealots. And they were known, the Sicarii were known for assassinating Romans and their leaders and Jewish collaborators using small daggers. And what they would do is they would move into large gatherings, first century, and they would have daggers on them, and whoever they were trying to eliminate, they would do it in a mass crowd and then pull out and get away with it. Okay? By the way, this isn't America. This is first century. They played a significant role in starting the first Jewish-Roman war that happened from 66 to 73 Common Era. Here's the thing. While these movements were popping up, there were lots of people in Judaism confused. Well, which path is the path that's going to get us liberated? They didn't know where to go. They were trying to figure it out. They were looking to their rabbis in the leadership, trying to decide, because you had the Pharisees, the Essenes, the Sadducees. You had all kinds of groups speaking all kinds of stuff. I want to just pause here and say, does it not feel sometimes overwhelming to be an American? How many voices do we have that are all screaming and claiming that this is the path, this is the way? And sometimes it gets really confusing because good sometimes appears as evil, and evil sometimes looks like good. And I just want to pause here and say, I think one of the ways that we've gotten into this moment of confusion is because I do believe that our president knew exactly what he's doing when his first matter of business stepping into office was to create this phrase, alternative facts. this man's smarter than you think he is. Because here's what historians know. If you can shift us into a post-truth society, then no one can say that is evil or that is good. So what you do is you twist it. And then you say, oh, that's just an alternative fact. Or that actually isn't true. So what happens is when you're able to convince people of this, then it doesn't matter. You could, check it out, make lies and people would begin to question it. Here's an example. You could say there was a list or a birthday card, and you could say, not my signature. And you're going to have a group of people going, probably right. You could. And here's what's wild. You can look at both signatures and go, no, I'm pretty sure that's your signature. Not mine. You could say, check this out. Let's say there was like a tape that came out. It was called Access Hollywood. Hear me. And let's say you say on that tape, you can grab women wherever you want. And then it comes out. Now, as humans, we hear it and we've seen it and we're like, oh yeah, that's him. But because there's no truth, absolute truth, he's flipped it. He can just easily, this is why I'm saying he knew what he was doing, because now it does not matter. When he said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, hear me, he can. Because the bulk of society now does not believe in truth, that there even is a truth. And once you confuse and muddy the waters of truth, you can get away with just about anything. And so what he said with Access Hollywood is, not my voice. Do you see? It's a very subtle spin, but when you muddy these waters, this is what transpires. Now, all of that said, there was a lot of confusion in the first century. And here's what I want you to know. Some wanted an armed insurrection. There were some groups going, grab your sword, let's do this. And before you judge the first century, I want you to remember how you feel right now. And how tempting it would have been to be in the first century when these Romans were crucifying your family members. How tempting it would have been to be like, you know what, Pastor Cody? We've tried the way of love, not really working for us. You know what I'm saying? And so you go to join the resistance movement in a different way. Grab your sword. Let's do this. Many believed that the only proper response to Roman oppression was to pick up the swords and drive the Romans out with violent resistance. In 64 AD, July 18th, a great fire of Rome broke out for 6 days. The emperor at the time was Nero, and he blamed everything that transpired on the Jesus people. Are you familiar with being blamed? That all the world's problems are because of X, Y, and Z. And turns out you're the X, the Y, and the Z. It left 70% of the city in smoldering ruins, and they placed all the blame on the left. You get what I'm saying. 66 AD, the Zealots rose up, and the branch off the Zealots called the Sicarii said, we've had enough. And they took on the Roman Goliath forces from Jerusalem and killed a garrison, 600 Romans. And they stood with pride going, we told you we were the way to peace. What they didn't know is Rome was a little bit larger. In 70 AD, Rome responded by crushing the uprising of the Sicarii and the Zealots, destroying Jerusalem and burning the temple. And all of this is what I believe Matthew is writing about. Now, he's post-writing, right? So if he's in 80, he's looking back. He knows what has transpired. He's trying to give an explanation for how they've gotten to where they are in the moment. And what he realizes is, he says, we're going to put this in this moment. Jesus, he was even around these zealots. What he would have said, and here's what I believe Matthew's getting at. Jesus knew that the broad path, the popular path, the road a lot of people were itching to take would only lead to destruction. And he didn't mean that metaphorically. Literally, it ended in destruction in 70 AD. So when Jesus says broad is the way that leads to destruction, that's what we're talking about. He insisted there was a better way. And I think for anything today, I want you to hear me. There's a warning here. Let's be careful who we follow and what methods we adopt. Because there will be many that come in the name of Jesus, in the name of Christianity, and in the name of love. But that path, friends, will only lead to destruction. And this is a confusing time in the first century, and it's a confusing time for us in America for a lot of people, because here's the fundamental question that was posed when this administration come in, and we still haven't answered the question, and that is this: what is truth? What is truth? What is truth? Now, I know most of us are here going, I can tell you, I got it. But I need you to know your enemy's also going, I can tell you, I got it. So then we say, okay, which one is true, and how do we determine truth? And is there any absolute truth? And to say there's no absolute truth, you can't say, because it's a contradiction, because if there's no absolute truth, then even your statement, there's no absolute truth, is an absolute truth. Does that make sense? Makes sense to me. And so I pause here and I say that is the fundamental question. What is truth? What is the way of love? What is God? I mean, can we talk about God? I mean, this name, talk about being used in vain. We just throw it out now like it's just my name. Like, oh, there's Cody, there's God. No. You got to give a little credit to our Jewish brothers and sisters who respect the name enough to not even use it. Like, let's just, how about Adonai? That'd be a little bit better. We just flippantly throw it out. And it's been wild to watch how in America, you have like the right and left, and it's far more complex than that, but you do have the right and left, and the right is trying so hard to own God. And then the left too is like, you can't have our God. And I think God's just like, I'm kind of good without all of you. And it's created, it ramps up and almost justifies the violence. Because listen, there's hate, but then there's defending God hate. And that's a different kind of hate. So, all of this says, I want to say something about Christian nationalism, and let's just get into this for the few minutes we have left, and then we're done. Okay, first, Christian nationalism. The reason I bring it up, because this is where we are. So let's shift from that first century to here. I don't know that there's a lot of difference. There's some similarities that we can find from what was happening in the first century when Jesus made this statement, broad is the way that leads to destruction, and narrow is the way that leads to life. They had movements back then that claimed to be Yahwistic, Yahweh. Judaism, we're true to it. We're true to the Torah. We're true to the commandments. But this is what required in this moment. Okay? There were many offshoots and branches of what was transpiring. And so it is today. If you live in America right now, you've probably been a bit confused sometimes because you hear people claiming to be Christian or something that is Christian that seems to diametrically oppose the way of Jesus. One of those movements is Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is a movement that uses the language of Christ to deceive people into believing their political path and ideology is a Christian path. And what I want you to know is that there are many people who have bought into the fact that that actually is or would have been the way of Jesus. Now, I want to give us an example of what took place this week. Charlie Kirk. I'm aware that some of you listening right now, probably more so than you that are in the room, might not realize or understand why there was so much upheaval this week. And the reason you don't realize it or understand it, and the reason I'm speaking like this is because I know, and I'm just going to be real frank with you, people like my parents are watching. My parents, best I can tell, I love them. They probably only watch Fox News, period. I have family members that all they watch is Fox News. So if I'm just letting you know, if that is all you watch, what I'm saying right now may be really strange. Okay? So I want to pause here and just say, this man, his words and his actions hurt many people. And I would just like to say the words and actions that I've heard coming out of his mouth are worthy of condemnation. I am not saying what I'm about to say to you to attempt to change your mind, for those watching. I am saying what I'm saying to you so that you can be informed. Some are ignorant and don't know there was another story to this man than the one they're seeing. Some, I'm aware, actually do know, and they just line up with it. Okay? I want to push back against my progressive liberal brothers and sisters for a minute that have said, stop wasting your energy. These people do know, they just don't care. I want to push back a minute and say something. That might be true. I don't know. But what I can tell you is I know my own personal family, and I know many of them actually don't know. There's some things they do know, but there are a lot of things they don't know. And I don't care if they change their mind. I hope they do. But what I want more than anything is that when I die, I can at least have been a voice to say, hey, were you aware of this? And how they respond to that is none of my business. But informing them is my business. And this is what we do around Vinings Lake. We hope to inform. And so I say all that to just say, if all you watched was Fox News, here's what you took away this week. He was a devoted man of God. And they portrayed his death as an emblematic rising violence against the, quote, radical left, unquote, targeting conservative Christian voices. And by the way, if you're liberal and you're like, I have not heard that, you're in an echo chamber too. And so my advice to you would be to actually start engaging on the other side and start listening to how the narrative is being spun. If you have the energy. Now, some of you are like, not there, Pastor. Do your thing, all right? They went so far as to portray him as and this is going to be hard for some of you, martyr for Christ. Now, I want to show you how this played out in real time this week, and we're going to be as non-judgmental as we can. And I also want to just say, my prayer over the last 2 days have just been, please, God, help my compass be love, help my compass be love, help my compass be love. But I want to show you how this plays out. And I should also add a bit of a trigger warning here. For all of my people of color, I'm about to read 2 quotes from Charlie Kirk that might enrage you. So if you need to leave the room, there is non-judgment to do so. But here's how it plays out. I flipped back and forth. Fox, CNN. I went online. I went to the conservative dark holes. They're there. Flipped over to the radical left holes. They're there. I was like, let's just look. As best you can, objectively. And I know that's hard to do, but let's just look. And I was like, look at that. Watch this. Fox News, quote from Charlie Kirk. They highlighted one of his last texts. And here's what one of his last texts were. Jesus defeated death so you can live, unquote. People like my family are like, America. Christian man of God, okay? Just letting you know. That quote is real. I saw it. He did tweet it. So I'm just letting you know. He did. It is there. Now I want to hold that quote beside one more quote that maybe some of our Fox News people haven't heard. And it goes like this. Dr. King, quote, Dr. King was an awful human being. Civil rights was a huge mistake, unquote. So let's just look at this. Jesus defeated death so you can live. Dr. King was an awful human being. Civil rights was a huge mistake. Let's just sit those side by side because that came from the mouth of a same individual. Now you start to see the exterior being a mirror to the interior. Let's go one more, 2 more. He said, quote, I believe in the Bible, and I believe that Christ rose from the dead on the 3rd day. He said, this is the foundation of my faith, and it guides my actions, unquote. Hold it. He also said, let's hold it side by side, black women do not have brain processing power to be taken seriously. You have to go steal a white person's slot, unquote. Now, I want to pause here and say, for the critics who say you're pulling stuff out of context, two things. One, I'm happy, I just don't have time today, happy to give you the full context. Two, the full context does not change the fact that this is racism. Okay? So let's hold those about. Just one more here, one more. Okay? Quote, I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing for me when I die. Unquote. Hold that. One more quote. Quote, I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. Let's just put those right beside each other. Now, if this makes you uncomfortable, I would invite you to pause for a minute and think about how uncomfortable this makes our people of color feel. And what I want to say to you is, if these quotes that Jesus defeated death so you can live by Charlie Kirk and Dr. King was an awful human being and civil rights was a huge mistake, if these feel incompatible, it's because they are. These quotes are not compatible with each other, and I also would like to say they're not compatible with the teachings and way of Jesus. And what you see in this moment, this week in American history, is you see the twisting of the truth. And this isn't new. The colonizers who came to America said they were Christians. The KKK said they were Christians. There have been mass shooters whose profile said they were Christians. There were insurrectionists on January 6th who flew Christian paraphernalia. They claimed to be Christians. There were, check this out, some of you know this, slave owners who claimed to be Christian. And what I want to say is I can no longer, as a pastor, as a human, and as someone who's given their life to the way of Jesus, I can no longer stand by as Christianity gets hijacked by a particular agenda that is not the way of Jesus. I cannot stand by as a Christian and watch Christ's name get hijacked to further justify hate, racism, bigotry, misogyny, and white supremacy. I believe the path of Jesus is the path of generosity, nonviolence, caring for the poor, the vulnerable, the oppressed, and the marginalized. And part of what I hope comes out of this moment in American history is that maybe, and this is my prayer, maybe what we're seeing is that all of this is surfacing so that we can begin to see just how much the name of Christ has been twisted and turned. And it can feel really strange at times because these people claim to be Christian people, and these people claim to be Christian people, and sometimes like, I don't know which way to go. This was common in the first century. Then I believe Jesus came and he said, broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there will be many who take that path. But narrow is the way that leads to life, and it will be a difficult path, make no mistake. It will be difficult. He said, if you want an easy path, go that way. By the way, the Roman roads were broad and smooth. If you want to go the Roman path, the Roman road is going to be broad and smooth for you now. But destruction is where it leads, is what Jesus says. But if you want to go to the path that leads to life, and that's what most of us in the community are like, yeah, life. That's a good word for it, right? The path that leads to life, he says, is narrow and it will be difficult. What does he mean by that? Few people will want to take this path. Why? Because it's hard. It's hard. This isn't easy. It's going to be really difficult, and it's going to be really tempting. And sometimes we may even get confused. Going, wait a minute. Wait, that kind of looks like a good path. What about that path? Yeah. So, what is the point today? You know, Jesus finishes his metaphor, and he says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. And so I would say to you, stay vigilant. Stay vigilant. In America, right now, it is important that you stay vigilant. When in doubt, check the fruit the tree is producing. Be cautious when you hear anyone bring God's name into a conversation, including this pastor, but especially politicians. Beware of people who crave power. They often use the name of Christ to preserve their positions of power, privilege, and supremacy. And I would encourage you, and this is the best I have, keep following the path of Jesus. Keep pointing people to the path of Jesus. I would also say to you, do not lose your humanity, people. Humanity was in fact the way of Christ. If Christ came for any reason, it was a revelation to show us how good it is to be human, to show us that we are all divine in our essence. Do not lose your humanity. We can recognize the divine image in another and also confront the oppressive actions of their unconscious behavior at the same time. And I would say to you, in every situation that comes at us in this moment, look for the most vulnerable among us. Look for them. They're there. Look for them. In this moment right now, I want you to look past all the noise and look underneath and say, where are the most vulnerable? And I need you to lean in, and here's what I need you to do. Listen to them. Listen to them. Hush, quiet your mouth. Don't push your tweet out. Listen to them. And if you can and you're able to, elevate those voices. Elevate them. Hear what they are saying. Look for the most vulnerable. Why you say that? Because this is where you will find Jesus. Because Jesus has always been the one who is hungry, the one who is in prison, the one who has been pushed to the edges and is marginalized. This is the Christ. And so when you have an administration where a catastrophe happens like this, you have to see this. And when they take it and then they use it to further oppress those on the edges, all the lights on the dashboard should be blinking. And this is exactly what is transpiring. This administration has blamed some of the least among us for what is transpiring because they cannot take ownership that perhaps maybe they have contributed or created a culture in America that values guns more than humans. Now, I would warn all of us to be careful as this administration weaponizes Charlie's death as a means to justify more suppression of those on the edges. As one writer said, this is straight out of the authoritarian playbook, and it's an attempt to seize more power. When Trump was asked recently on Fox and Friends, someone said to him, we have radicals on the right as well. How can we fix this country? And he said, quote, I'll tell you something that's going on that might get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are only radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem. Do you see what's happening here? It is a pitting against right and left. Friends, I need you to hear me something. First of all, that's not going to get us anywhere. And if somehow, I need you to hear me, if somehow in some degree we can hold each other's humanity, but at the same time call out the toxic ideology, that is the path forward. And we're going to have to learn to kind of come together, at least for those on the edges that aren't so far radical and deep and lost sight of their own unconscious. But we're going to have to come together. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if this administration and this authoritarian leader has its way, it will have us all in a civil war. And I want you to know, I do not believe the problem is with left and right. I actually believe the ultimate situation that we need to deal with is rich and poor. And I need you to hear me. This is critical to know because I do think if you watch the billionaires of this country. Elon Musk himself this week said the Democratic Party is the party of murder. Why would you make a statement like that? Because you are so wealthy and the system is working for you that if you could just pit everyone against everyone else and watch them just fight it out, you win. And so it's important for us to shift and turn. And if we're able, and here's where my heart is right now leaning, and this is what it's waking me to. If we're able, let's somehow begin to lean over to those that may see the world a little different. But at the same time, now hear me, they want your existence to be here. I'm aware to my people in here that are fully oppressed, like I can't meet people halfway when they don't even want me to exist. You are correct. But I want you to know there are some who do want your existence. And if there's a way for us to start speaking to each other and saying, okay, listen, there's something larger at play here, then maybe for us, that's a way forward. Now, all of that said, let me just close here. We've gone too long, and then we're going to, eat and have drinks. Come join us. I just want to close here. I, like many of you, opened my social media, and I saw the video. And I didn't know what it was when I saw it because things had not gone public yet. It was just a random thing. I was out riding, actually, and I saw a video pop in, and I watched it. And I want to say this. I wished I'd never seen it, but it's wild how social media works so fast. And next thing I know, I'm just sitting there just looking at it going, what's this video? What's this guy saying? And then literally it happened before my very eyes. I'll be real talk. I felt nauseous a little bit. But I went back because I was like, I need to hear what's being said in the moment. And for those of you that aren't aware, his last words, he was actually at a university and someone asked him a question about trans people and gun violence. I believe the individual said something like, how many trans people have committed mass shootings? And his response was, too many, which, fair response. Yeah, too many. One is too many, right? But here's the twist. All right? You see this, right? The question was then followed up by this. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years? And this man began to answer, and he put a microphone to his mouth, and he said, quote, counting or not counting gang violence. Now, as a whistleblower, I hope you hear and see that. You know where the direction of that, you feel, this is a part of what we do here. You feel, for my white friends in here, the subtle, what we would call subtle, nice little political, I can say this and get away with it. And I'm not trying to twist this anything than what it actually is. But I found it eye-opening that the last word out of his mouth before he died was violence. Literally, his last word was violence. Then he's gone. I know all of us, if you put some of our worst moments beside our good moments, probably not a good look. Probably not a good look. So I would encourage you, don't lose your empathy, even though they're against empathy. Hang on to it. All of that said, here's my prayer for us as a small little collective in Mableton. May our last word not be violence. May our last word be love. May you be moved by love. May love be your guide, and may it be your compass. May your allegiance not be to the Democratic Party. May your ultimate allegiance be to the way of love. And all I can tell you is this: when you and I meet our death one day, I don't think we will have any regrets if we chose the straight and narrow and a path that leads us all to love. You will never regret love being your last word. So, friends, can we open our hearts this morning in all of the anger, in all of the confusion, in all of this frustration? And here's what I ask just this week: may you invite love to come in and soften all the areas of your heart. And then may we work for justice, speak up for the marginalized, but may the propeller be love.